when you were diving into kind of new areas into your creative passion and career, was some of the skills like you kind of learned through art school, or was it something like, let's say, a documentary, for example? You have kind of no idea where to start, and you just managed to find a way to make it happen.
Yeah, that's probably been the way. I think it's the idea that excites you, and then that creates the passion that then drives you to think, okay, how do I do this? Like when I made my first documentary, it's like, okay, I mean, I'm not a cameraman. We don't have any budget. How do you make a documentary? I went to the film school actually at Afters in Sydney. They've got a lot of short courses. I did heaps of short courses. I bought a camera. I did a short course of how to use the camera. I did a short course, the art of the interview, how to interview people. I did a documentary short course. So I did a lot of short courses just to upskill myself in a really short period of time. And probably the most valuable one I did was a data wrangling short course, which it sounds like a bit of a weird term, but it's the person on a set who really looks after the data. As the film camera is recording the data, it usually goes onto, digitally anyway, it goes onto drives, but there's a whole process of having to name these things appropriately, create backups, ideally 2 backups, and that saved me because we were part of the document. This is the surfing documentary I made. We were in Los Angeles, or we were filming in San Diego actually 2 weeks. So we had no money, so we were doing it on our own money, asking people to contribute. We had 2 weeks of fantastic filming, surfing, interviews, and I had all of the data with me on a drive, and I had luckily, because of this data wrangling course, copied the data onto another drive, given it to the producer and say, we've got to keep these files separate from each other in case something happens. And inevitably, when I was in Los Angeles, the boot of the car was broken into and they stole all of my drives with all of the footage.
Oh,
2 weeks of filming, everyone's money to get there and film all this stuff. But I had created copies and given them to the producer. So I called the producer, who was on a plane back to Sydney, and I said, as soon as you get to Sydney, you've got to create a copy of this data and you've got to put it somewhere else. And that saved
wow.
the project. So never underestimate the power of, sometimes simple information, critical information. I think discerning what's important to know. The big picture stuff is always fun, but especially when you're dealing with technology, understanding the details of things, how things work, and the relevance and importance of them, is quite important. In that case, particularly, because that having done that one little short course at Afters, the film school in Sydney, saved the whole project.
Yeah. Wow. So thankfully, there was a bit of a happy ending there for that project. Do you have like any like themes or factors that influence your work now compared to when you were first starting into your projects?
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I loved making beautiful things. I loved painting and drawing. When I started as a kid, I was doing a lot of animals. We'd go to the zoo, a lot of birds and, landscapes and things up at the farm. And then when I studied graphic design, I just loved the process of making something look good. And I didn't really care what it was. But as I became older, it became more important to me to be doing that with something I felt had some value or gave me some sense of worth or purpose. I probably hit a bit of a low point when I was in Barcelona working as a visual effects designer and on a project for Hubba Bubba Bubblegum. And we had all these advertising executives around and they were spending 100,000 euros on this Hubba Bubba Bubblegum commercial, and I was putting it all together. And I just thought, and everyone was taking it so seriously, and I thought, for goodness sake, guys, it's just bubblegum, And that was sort of a bit of a turning point in my life, really, because I thought, I want to work on things that are of more value to me and to others. So when I moved to Germany, then I decided to focus more on my career as a designer. But I also started to write stories and make documentaries and, write theatre. And so that became much more important to me. And then the type of films, I think what works well is if you can find something that resonates with you, that you feel is important for you, it's much easier to sort of stay engaged in these projects. It's a little bit like books. I've just also just rediscovered reading, my passion for reading. I haven't read for many, many years, but I've taken it up again. And I was in New Zealand just last week and had a book, and I just wasn't really engaged in it. It was a story about somebody somewhere that didn't really interest me, and I found it really, really hard to get engaged in it. Whereas if you read something that you know touches your life or is relevant to your life or your personality, it's easier to be engaged with it. And it was the same with my films, you know, and the plays that I wrote, is that there was some idea that I felt was interesting to explore for myself, and also offered something to others that was interesting. Perhaps it was a new way of looking at things. But they're the things that have really sustained my creative practice. It's finding those things that really move you, that really interest you and really move you, and then explore and create around those things. That's it's pretty rewarding. Yeah, it's pretty rewarding.